So I noticed a lot of people make requests for me to cover games they loved as kids, and this is awesome. But with so many folks chiming in, it's hard to cover a requested game and have it be something everyone wanted to see. So one simple poll later, you all chose Wario Land, Super Mario Land 3. This game looks so silly! It's all ugly and weird, and it's kind of meant to look that way too. You play as Mario's evil counterpart Wario, and your mission isn't to save anyone or anything. It's to steal money back from pirates who stole it from you. Although, because Wario's a bad guy, he stole all that treasure he owns in the first place. But hey, who cares about the story? Not me, I'm a man of action. And Wario Land has an interesting take on that action. Here's a game that resembles something like a parody of Super Mario Bros., and yet it introduces some totally unique concepts that make it something all its own. It's got a strange design and an even stranger world, so put on the wrong hat, apparently, because it's time to explore Wario Land. So, this is probably going to be one of the most confusing things I ever say about a game's visuals, but believe me when I say this, the best thing about the graphics in Wario Land is that everything looks stupid and ugly. These fat night creatures look lazy, the thwomps look like they're exerting serious effort just to move. Wario in particular doesn't exactly look like he did in concept art and in later games, but that's the thing about this game, it's not taking itself too seriously. I mean, any game where you're gonna play as a fat ugly guy stealing money back from pirates isn't gonna come out looking like Moby Dick. Now is not the time for serious matters. Oh man, do I love the way this game's bosses look. Their designs look like the love child of Nintendo and early 90s Nickelodeon. You know, that whole gross is great mentality stretched to its breaking point. There's an overly muscular bull, a mischievous ghost, and even a... The in-game music sounds demented and mischievous, like Wario himself. And the sound effects, let me tell ya, they add a lot of punch. Just listen to how awesome it sounds when you plow through an enemy. Man, that's satisfying. The world maps look pretty charming too. It's reminiscent of Super Mario World, which inspired both Mario Land 2 and this game. Check out how cool the endgame map is. The pirate fortress is wavering with mystical, evil energy. Your doom is nigh. The actual levels feel a little blank though. There's occasional spots where they look really fantastic, but for the most part the largeness of the characters on screen seems to limit how much of the stage you get to see, so the levels look a bit less detailed. It's not a big problem, but it is noticeable. Speaking of noticeable, I just noticed that I'm not gonna do a segue. So yeah. Wario Land looks like a parody of the Mario games, so it's probably not that surprising that the game plays like a parody as well. But saying, it's like Mario but doofy or something, doesn't quite do it justice. Because you see, Wario Land is, well, it's kind of genius. It's got some of the most well thought out design I've seen in a game, and it proves that Gunpei Yokai's team over at Nintendo R&D 1 were capable of great things when they weren't forced to merely mimic more successful games for profit. Wario moves at a slow, lumbering pace. You can do a dash attack for short bursts of speed, but you lose momentum very quickly and end up back at the slower walk cycle right away. Why, in a world where platformers work so beautifully with momentum, would a game like this embrace drag and inertia? Well, for one, Wario's fat. He's a little chubster, and this game uses its design to convey that. Makes you feel like you're actually controlling a character that's heavy and strong. If you just tap the jump button, you barely get any lift. And if you hold it, you get this floaty cartoon jump. That means you have to time your jumps, you ugly cow. This game doesn't want you rushing forward like some running Ronnie, and if you don't slow down and give yourself time to judge jumps or enemy placement, you're gonna fall. A burn. Or get ghost touched. Take these spiky balls. They come tearing down at you, but they're only gonna hit you if you rush forward with reckless abandon. If you take the time to stop and duck into a cranny though, you can safely avoid them. Pain only comes to those who refuse to wait. That's pretty zen. Treasure collecting is also a big incentive to slow down and stay observant of your surroundings. Plenty of levels have you passing by big scary doors with keyholes on them, tempting you with the mystery of what lies within. How can you pass by a big ominous door and not want to know what's on the other side?
Perhaps in finding the treasure, I'll find myself.
Admittedly, the slow pace doesn't always work to the game's advantage. There was a lot of love put into the game, but it could benefit from some parts being reworked or cut out altogether. There are empty sections of levels where stuff just doesn't happen, and occasionally there's ladders that you climb up for no reason other than developers were like, yeah, this is a good spot for a ladder. These parts don't ruin the game, but they drag it down a little bit. They don't add to the difficulty either, although it's not like this game is particularly short on challenges. Some levels you'll plow through with no effort, and others will have you at the game over screen before you know it. But you know what's truly evil about this game? When you get to a game over screen, the game will actually take back one of the treasures you've collected. Your bling is held hostage. Blazow! Speaking of evil, can we talk about the coin-operated checkpoints? The mechanic's perfectly fair. There's coins everywhere. What's unusual about the checkpoints is that they're clearly offering posts to Satan. I mean, look at it. Can you tell me it isn't? Seriously? You make a literal deal with the devil so you can come back from the dead.
Someday I will borrow your soul, Wario. I won't keep it, but I'll return it curiously moist and slightly used. Meh.
Power-ups are interesting in that they mix up the gameplay, but sometimes they can create limitations. Again, this is a slow down and think mechanic. Not every power-up will be perfectly useful for every situation. For example, the Dragon Cap gives you a very powerful attack, but removes your ability to dash, which really hurts your maneuverability. The Viking Cap will allow you to do a ground pound, which allows you to break blocks below you. And this funny-looking cap? Well, let me tell you about it. So the bosses in this game are interesting, not just in their appearances, but also in the way they behave. Beating each boss is like a miniature puzzle. The fatal flaw in this, though, is that once you figure out what to do, the challenge just evaporates, and you're serving these fools like fast food. They steaming in seconds. Take this bull guy. You can't hurt him with conventional attacks, but once you figure out how to get him out of the ring and into the lava, fight's over. That's it. His family weeps. But I suppose when you weigh the challenge of the levels versus the boss fight, it would be pretty insane to have a difficult boss fight at the end of a Spike Ball Sailor Death Gauntlet. The difficulty starts ramping up mid-game, and it would be pretty soul-crushing to be dying and losing treasure from the main stages and the boss battles. So I guess the boss fights are meant to be sort of like a vacation. It's a weird way to balance things. But how does this game weigh in overall? Let's break it down. Here's the good stuff about Wario Land. First off, the game's art style is weird and hilarious. Rarely does a game revel so much in asymmetry and ugliness. Wario Land looks good because everything in the game world looks bad. In a good way. Second, the gameplay is unique, slow-paced, and challenging. You can't just run around like
famed Olympic runner Usain Bolt
and expect things to end well. It requires patience and thought just to get through the levels, let alone collect all the treasures. So that makes this game a pretty rewarding experience. And third, the game has lots of hidden worlds and other secrets. You can beat the game without collecting a single treasure or finding any hidden levels, but if you want to explore the game further, the option's there. But every game has its downsides, and here are the downsides to Wario Land. First off, some levels in the game can look pretty sparse and boring. They've got good fundamental design, but they aren't extremely varied, and they're a real step down from the sheer variety of visuals that we got in Super Mario Land 2. Second, the game's treasure hunting mechanic often requires a lot of backtracking, because you have to essentially repeat the levels where you missed the treasure doors. Usually it's still fun, but sometimes it can get a bit tedious. Third, the game's difficulty curve is somewhat uneven. Early levels seem way too hard, and some later levels are shockingly easy. The same could be said for bosses, too. Things generally get harder the further you get in the game, but if you want to play this one, remember that it's very easy to get stuck early on. I have a confession to make. When I put up my poll and you all voted for Wario Land, I was skeptical. Because of all the Game Boy games I loved as a kid, Wario Land was not one of them. In fact, I never actually played Wario Land until you all brought it up to me. But this is an absurdly goofy and creative game that was sort of ahead of its time. Sure, the level designs aren't always stellar, and some of the game's mechanics artificially extend its length, but it did some daring things with its design that I honestly haven't seen to this day. It's funny how some people complain that video games only appeal to our base instincts and twitch reflexes, when in reality, games like Wario Land show that patience and careful thought can inform a game's design from the ground up. This game tells us to be careful, think about your surroundings, and call your parents once in a while. God, you're such a disappointment. Overall, I'd give Wario Land an 8 out of 10. You can find it as a download on the 3DS eShop for $3.99. If you're looking to get it in physical cartridge format for your Game Boy, that'll run you about $6 to $7 on sites like Amazon, plus $4 or $5 shipping and handling. Well, that's all for this episode of Old School on the Go. If you liked what you saw, be sure to rate this video and subscribe to my channel. And if you got something to say, make sure you sound off in the comments. Until next time, I'm Mike, and that was Old School on the Go. Neil Gaiman.